It's Friday, and you know what that means. Welcome to the Friday Show, presented by Monmouth Park. I'm Bloodstock editor Joe Nevills, joined by editor-in-chief Natalie Voss, news editor Chelsea Hackbarth. But before we get started, a few words about Monmouth Park. They've got a special Memorial Weekend set of cards coming up with racing Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. First post at 12:15 p.m. Then we've got Friday racing starting up on June 3rd. Monmouth's 50-cent win early pick 5 is the nation's earliest pick 5, and for on-site customers, Monmouth has fixed odds wagering. The odds when you bet are the odds that you get. Now, here at the Paulick Report, we cover a lot of regulatory topics, and what usually grinds our gears is inaction. Rules that should be in place but aren't, and their consequences. Today, we're going to go in the opposite direction and look at some of the rules that are in place or about to be in place that just don't work. Chelsea, take it away. What rule do you see out there that really just doesn't work?
Well, I don't know if it doesn't work necessarily because I'm not sure what it's designed to do. Claiming jail rules are one of my big pet peeves because you claim a horse at a meet in, say, Kentucky or Indiana, and you can't leave the state for a certain number of days. The rule, I guess, is designed to keep field sizes high, but there are so many slightly sneaky but not really sneaky ways to get around the rule that it doesn't work if people don't want it to work. So it just, those are my pet peeve.
And it's the kind of thing that we've seen build up in a lot of other states too. I know Kentucky recently passed some rules that could be quite restrictive to claiming jail type, rules, doing something that, you can't run a horse out of state until 30 days at the end of the meet that you've claimed the horse in. So for a longer meet like Turfway Park, that could be quite a significant chunk of time.
Yeah, I think the Turfway Park meet goes from January 1st to mid-April.
Yeah.
And so you would be unable to take the horse outside of Kentucky until mid-May. May is the month that comes after April.
Yes. That is how calendars work. Yes.
Appreciate that. But the other interesting thing is, like, Indiana, there was a court battle over claiming jail rules that concluded in 2017. And so they removed the 60-day claiming jail rule from the Racing Commission books. But instead, they made a house rule. So the 60-day claiming jail rule still exists, just not in the Racing Commission office. It's at the Indiana office.
Boy, house rules versus state rules. Where have we heard this before, guys? This sounds familiar to viewers familiar with the Friday show, but I just can't figure out where that is. I don't know.
Natalie?
If I never have to explain the designation between state rules and house rules in a story or in an email again, it will be too soon. I understand why it's confusing, but oh my goodness, it's so exhausting.
So, Natalie, what rule is jumping out at you as one that is potentially maybe a little ridiculous?
So this one's actually, I think, about to go away, maybe. But I would have to sort of call back to the rule in New York about married jockeys having to have the horses that they're on having to be a coupled entry. This has sort of been a topic of discussion ever since Trevor McCarthy and Katie Davis got married. They sort of ran into this. They didn't know about the rule beforehand. They had been engaged. They had been dating. They'd been riding against each other. And suddenly they were told, oh yeah, now that you're married, you can't be on uncoupled entries, which resulted in Katie in particular losing a lot of work. So I think they've now left the state. I don't think that they're attempting to ride anymore. But there's been a battle about this rule ever since then. The commission in New York had passed a rule to sort of rescind that. It went through the state legislature unanimously, and then unexpectedly the governor vetoed it, sent it back to the commission and kind of said, you decide when horses should be coupled, which I would have thought they did by saying that in these circumstances, that's not necessary. But anyway, the commission has again, this year in February, passed a regulation saying we're going to get rid of that. I think it's out for public comment right now, I believe, or it might be back to the commission, but then they have to send it back to the legislature. So it's not officially gone yet, but it looks like it's going away. I don't know what the original idea behind this was. My best guess, because nobody quite seems to know for sure, other than it's a rule that's been around for a long time. And the best I can imagine is that they sort of didn't want spouses with a presumed mutual financial interest doing anything inappropriate in the course of a race to try to sort of fix the race. And I find that kind of astounding because, honestly, people who are willing to criminally conspire with each other to fix a race by default have a mutual financial interest and do not have to be married to each other or related to each other. Of course, the emails that we got after this sort of became the news was, well, there's jockeys who were related to each other in other ways who ride against each other all the time, the Ortiz brothers being the top example. And no one seems to feel like their horses should be coupled entries. And yeah, sure enough, the cases that I'm aware of from like the 60s, 70s, 80s of race fixing, or other inappropriate behavior sort of between jockeys was usually with people who were not related or maybe were siblings or cousins or something like that. So I don't know what the goal was with this initially, but it doesn't seem like this is really accomplishing the only goal that I can think of that rule probably had.
And that's the thing. There are so many family ties amongst, any jockey colony. I mean, you look at just the Bays family out on the West Coast. There were so many of them, some still even going today that, it would be nearly impossible to have a race without, some sort of coupling there, and the product would be unbettable. I mean, I know plenty of instances of fathers and sons riding against each other, husbands and wives running against each other. As you mentioned, brothers, cousins, nephews, you name it. It wouldn't work. And coupling them wouldn't work from a field size standpoint. And the races turned out fine. Ultimately, you're trying to make money for yourself. That's what we're all trying to do here. And I feel like trying to restrict that just isn't the play.
Right. And, it just sort of seems, it also sort of seems to presume that a husband and wife are going to be more likely to cooperate with each other, or two husbands and two wives. Two spouses would be more likely to cooperate with each other. Rather than being more competitive against each other. I think that we've certainly seen examples of jockeys who are in a relationship who say, at least, that, like, if anything, they're kind of going to work harder against the other rider and put more effort in because they want the bragging rights later on. So I don't get where this notion comes from that, like, a relationship between two people, the level of competition or independence or whatever is dictated by that. But hopefully that's going to go away soon.
You two wouldn't know anything about that with the Eclipse Award tally in that house, would you?
Not at all. Not
at all.
What's it standing at right now? I can't remember.
Well, mine's behind me.
I have enough. That's what I have. Now, but you do bring up an interesting point here as I attempt to change the subject from the Eclipse Award count. Relationship. You mentioned the word relationship there. And for all the jockeys that are married, there are plenty more that are, potentially dating each other. I mean, you look back to, the jockeys reality show. The big point of that was Mike Smith and Chantel Sutherland dating. And, I assume they would have some sort of shared mutual interest in making money. If you start policing down to that, it's going to get even harder to pull off. So moving the discussion to California, since we're already talking about jockeys in California there, my rule that doesn't work is one that isn't necessarily a rule yet, but is potentially in the works for it. I'm talking about the California Horse Racing Board's proposal to give jockeys who win potentially graded stakes races shares in stallion seasons, or give them a stallion season from their first season at stud as sort of an incentive to bring jockeys back. I think this is a good idea wrapped in a bad idea. I think it's a great idea to incentivize jockeys, give them reasons to come race on your circuit. We see this in plenty of different places with ship and win programs to bring in trainers, to bring in horses, to bring in owners. And I don't think jockeys should be separated from that. I think if you want to have a competitive marketplace, you have to have something that helps bring in the best and the brightest riders. I just don't think, one, I don't think it would be legally enforceable to do with stallion seasons. And two, I just don't think it's going to affect that many jockeys. You think of how many graded stakes races there are in California and split that down the middle, because half of them are going to be for fillies, or potentially half of them, you're not going to get any stud rights from that. Then you take out geldings. There are a lot of geldings that run very well in graded stakes in California. You're not getting any rights off of that. Then you take that even to a smaller slice for ones that are actually going to go to stud. Okay, so you have a small fraction there. Then you have to take out the ones that are actually going to go to stud in America. If a horse goes to stud in Korea, they're probably not going to, they have no incentive to participate in that program. If a horse goes to stud in even a smaller jurisdiction in North America, it might be harder to legally bind that unless you have something dead to rights, which if they're going outside of California, probably not. So we're talking about a very small percentage of horses that would actually qualify for something like this and would actually play ball with it. And even then, you're probably still dealing with a small portion of jockeys who actually benefit it. You think of the horses that win graded stakes in California, you think of a lot of Baffert horses, and he rides a lot of the same guys every time. So I could see Mike Smith benefiting from this very much. But would it bring someone in from the East Coast who had been riding in Southern California, come home to California and make money off of this? Probably not. I don't think it would work as well as people think it does. It's a good idea. There's a nugget of a good idea here. This just isn't the way to do it.
Well, and you talk about it being sort of a good concept wrapped in a bad idea. And when I initially read about this, Steve Anderson at the Daily Racing Forum had sort of previewed this idea ahead of the committee meeting where this was discussed a couple weeks ago, I think. And when I was first sort of reading his summary of there's this concept they're going to talk about, I had initially misunderstood and thought they were talking about a recurring stallion season. And I thought, oh, great. This is an attempt to create some sort of financial ongoing security for a jockey because, probably riders at the very, very top levels, I think, are largely doing okay. But a lot of jockeys don't have that kind of long-term plan. If they were to get injured and suddenly couldn't ride, then, one of the many sort of hardships they have to deal with is that they don't necessarily have money coming in. So at first I thought, oh, great, they're going to try to create some sort of system in California where a jockey might be more interested in riding there because there's some interest in their long-term future. And then I read on and realized, oh no, it's a one-season thing. So this concept of making California more attractive by addressing specific challenges to jockeys is definitely a good thing. And hopefully they think of a different way to do that.
And that's the thing. If it's going to be for one season, say a stallion that wins a graded stakes in California, that could be anything from a horse standing for an introductory stud fee of $100,000 to a horse standing for $1,000, $5,000. It might not be that significant, especially, and I don't know if this has been addressed in the rule or if they've even thought about it. What percentage of that goes to an agent? Who is going to take slices out of that pie? All of a sudden, even a $5,000 valuation is going to go down quite a bit. So the amount of help that this would actually provide is looking smaller and smaller the more I think about it.
Well, and it sounded like the committee was going to do some more sort of fact-finding, especially about the legality of requiring this versus asking for this from owners and sort of toss the idea around a little bit more. So I don't think it's something that's probably imminently coming to the rule book in California, but hopefully as they do some fact-finding in this process, they'll come up with something that's actually workable.
And as we've found with the Jockey Club Studbook Cap, breeders don't really like to be told what to do. So I really don't see them signing up for, yes, please have this, free season to this stallion I will not benefit whatsoever from. I can see them fighting that tooth and nail, even if it's going to be relatively insignificant. Thank you again to Monmouth Park for sponsoring this week's episode of the Friday Show. Remember, we've got a special 3-day weekend coming up, Memorial Day weekend. We have cards on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, each beginning at 12:15 p.m. Then we got Friday cards coming up on June 3rd. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.